I am Dave Henning with the Fresh Start Podcast, fresh ideas for business and personal growth, coming to you live today from Costa Rica with my very special guest, Mark Villareal. He's a three-time international best-selling author of leadership-style books. He's been around the block. You might recognize these initials: ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and over 70 radio shows. Outstanding. You were in corporate America. You've written lots of books. Your newest book is for women, and you've got some children's books and some really cool things going on. So anyway, let me shut up for a minute and say, Mark, welcome to the program today. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's real pleasure to be on. I really appreciate it.
One of the things I caught in your bio was the phrase servant leadership, and I'm blessed to be connected with a guy named Jeff Bell, who used to work for Bill Gates at Microsoft, and now he's working for a big company out of Oklahoma in legal services, and he calls himself a servant leader. We've met. Excellent guy, and you use that title. So what does servant leadership mean to you?
Well, servant leadership means that the more I really focus on other people's success, mine comes naturally. And I realized that I always tell a story, about my learning life lessons. And when I was 20 years old, I was terminated from employment when I was put in a position as a manager of a restaurant. But I was displaced there because I was seemed to be the one that knew everything at the time. But with no development plans, no assessments of what skills I still needed to learn. And obviously was devastated to be terminated. But I read the book, 1 Minute Manager, after being terminated.
I love that book.
I read it once a year. It's a 45-minute read, but it really just, I said, this is what I'm going to start doing and put these practices into place. And when it talks about catching people doing something right, it's really is a book about how a manager can become a leader, because not all managers are leaders.
Exactly. It's very powerful lessons in that book for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it just realized that the more I worked on other people's development, which means I had to assess their skill sets with them and build plans and focus on their learning, my success catapulted. It was like, okay, if everything's built right, I don't have to focus on my success. I have to focus on theirs, because theirs builds up to mine. And that's where the passion develops of seeing people develop. I always say, my greatest day is where just seeing people learn and achieve their goals. And that's the biggest rewards. And so servant leadership is just having that understanding that it's about them. And as you and other people, my mom used to always tell me that, but some of the lessons she would teach me. And that helped me just develop that if I can build the right plans, focus on the individuals around me, that as they succeed, I succeed.
Absolutely. I'm chuckling because I was working at a local grocery store when I was probably 15 years old, and I had to take the little old lady's grocery cart out to their car, and I would jump on the back and ride it through the parking lot. And other interesting things that we did back then, the stock boys. And the manager calls me in and he says, Dave, I don't think you're cut out for the grocery business, so I'm going to let you go. So I got fired. But I'm thinking at 15, it wasn't exactly a career choice to stay in the grocery business my entire life. But anyway, I relate to you putting in a position of running a restaurant, and but out of which came something really good. Obviously, the whole concept of servant leadership. So what does emotional intelligence have to do with leadership? What is that all about?
Well, emotional intelligence has always been there, but it's obviously a big word now, emotional intelligence. And so there's 5 components of emotional intelligence. One is, are you aware of your own emotions? 2, can you harness your own emotions? Because even though you're aware, some people can't harness their own emotions. My dad could, he was the drill instructor before I was born. So always had that drill instructor mentality. But, then are you able to motivate not only yourself, but others by understanding their emotions, the ability to recognize the emotions of others? And have that ability of, because each person's different, you might motivate them differently and proactively even. So, and then, do you have the social skills to interact, and do you understand empathy when to utilize it? Empathy is not sympathy. It's different. It's putting yourself in other people's shoes from their perspective and understanding it. And when you can understand that as well, it actually increases your ability to interact with other individuals at different levels and have success. And it's so important today because of the diversity of the work groups out there, whether it's different age levels, to different, ethnic, backgrounds and everything else in between, that it's become more prevalent. And in fact, it states now that a CEO of an organization needs to have a higher EQ. So the EQ, it would be the score of the 5 components, than IQ. So they need to have a higher emotional intelligence level than they would have to be an IQ. So that's a big impact.
Exactly. And I love what you said about your mother was quite an influencer. And what I hear you saying about servant leadership is you're an influencer, but your mother really had a really neat impact on your life. What did she tell you? Never let the little boy grow out of you?
Yeah, well, obviously I wrote about her in my book, Leadership Lessons from Mom. And, she just had, a bunch of sayings, and, some she borrowed, I'm sure. They weren't all created by her, but she would always just encourage me. I never want to let that little boy in you grow out of you, because when you're a little boy, or, a girl, but I'm a boy, obviously, you dream big. You always think that you can accomplish everything, but somewhere in life, things tell you differently, and you start squashing your dreams. And she said, if you keep that little boy in you, you'll believe that you can accomplish a lot, and you will. And more importantly, you'll help others do the same. And that's actually, too, why I do have a children's book series as well as my business books, because it's my way of paying it forward to help the youth always dream big, that they can accomplish a lot.
That is fantastic. And I have the name. Tell me about your children's book. Let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Right. Well, it's a long title. It's called The Adventures of Park Ranger Brock Cliffhanger and his Junior Park Ranger. So I wanted kids to dream big. I want them to embrace a good role model, and park rangers make great role models. They learn about the national state parks, whichever one the book is about at that time. And then they learn about how to take care of the parks and what are some important lessons. My first book, that tells the story of where 2 children are missing that went hiking. And so while they're looking for them, they run through, well, what are the 10 things that these kids didn't do before they went hiking that you should do? What are the rules? Once they were missing, what are the 6 things they should have done? And then in the book, they encountered some wildlife and got a little scared. And when you encounter wildlife, what should you do? So it really wanted to teach lessons within it as well, but also show good role modeling. And I love park rangers, and who doesn't love national or state parks? I live in one, so that's how much I love it.
Awesome. Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York, and my mom and dad were big on camping and taking us to state parks. And it was just fascinating as a kid to be hiking around on a little trail and a deer jump right in front of your face. And just the outdoors was so fantastic. We went all through Pennsylvania and Gettysburg and all over the historic sites. And it was just a fantastic memory for a little boy, for sure, to carry with me all my life, all the lessons. And I like how you structured your book to be actual, not just a story, but a story with real lessons. There's something about stories, in the sales world, they say facts tell and stories sell. But
right.
Yeah, so I like your books. Are they available, by the way, in audio book as well, or in the written book?
Right now, they're just in the print or the ebooks, the Kindle or Nooks, but they're not in audio yet. I've had a few people ask, especially on Leadership Lessons from Mom, is that in audio? So I need, but with 8 books, and it's always the next idea is in my mind. I have to make the time for it.
Of course. Yeah. Well, I do that kind of stuff, by the way. If I can help you out, just say that.
Oh, awesome.
I'd be glad to help you out.
That's why it's great making connections.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your mother also used the phrase "bad news does not get better with time." What does that mean?
Well, I mean, first of all, she'd always say, "I'm going to raise you by rewards or consequences," and you choose whether it's rewards, but you will face consequences. And but naturally, as you learn how to face those consequences, will get you back on the reward side. So everything she taught really just because advanced me in leadership because that's how we manage people, rewards or consequences. And so she was always big on character, and she would say, uh, your character as you go is if you understand that bad news does not get better with time, meaning things will happen. And, maybe it's as a child, you may hide things from us, but eventually they find out. And when we find them out, it's not better, it's worse, and, but then as she saw me go into leadership and in business, she would always even still say, are you teaching your people bad news does not get better with time? And I'd always teach them that's the character of the leader I want. And, I reported to CEOs or presidents for over 21 years, what called the C level. And I've had to make some of those phone calls and to make sure that was one of the values I always had to live of. I need to call you because bad news doesn't get better with time. However, I need to let you know this because it is one of the values I live by. And let's talk through this. And I possibly might need your mentorship as well. So she was just real big on character, and that was one of the tests.
That's outstanding. Yeah. What I hear you saying is you could use that phrase to bring up the subject without like berating people and beating them up, but they might need beating up. But nevertheless, it was the way you said what you said and did what you did that allowed for correction.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually part of emotional intelligence. Is you've always heard the phrase left brain, right brain, and in emotional intelligence, we teach left brain is where you protect yourself if you think you're being attacked. So when people are being corrected, they tend to go to the left brain. And it's really left brain and what you call frontal cortex is where logic and reason is. That if you approach it with that type of format of, hey, bad news does not get better with time. And I actually teach when I do workshops on emotional intelligence, 6 keywords or phrases, how to start your sentence that keeps someone in their frontal cortex or moves them out of their left brain. So you can have a conversation that's more logical and reason instead of both of you being in the left brain and having an argument, being combative. Emotional intelligence is even how you start sentences, how you approach things, and it can be very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been sharing with some of my podcast guests that I've been on it lately on this kick exit for quite a while. This my own personal mantra for me is, what did I learn from this? I'm talking about my need for correction or whatever.
Right.
I think I might in high school. I don't think they knew what ADD was.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife says that to me all the time.
Yeah. So I have this little joke. If I used to be nervous and jerky, now I'm not nervous anymore.
Oh.
Exactly.
I have to tell my wife that one. She always says, you who has our whole life in spreadsheets. So she makes those jokes about myself.
And you've worked with some $1 million, $1 billion, multi successful companies, and you work with people who at the C level who most of them are human beings, right?
Well, that's the thing that you find is that they're all human beings.
Yeah.
I've worked in small organizations and one of them out here, Cesar Chavez Foundation, that I worked with their leadership team for a year. They have 24 leaders that we took them through a program, and they're a $5 billion organization. So everything's scalable, but it really breaks down to the individual. And one of the things when I work with organizations, I tell them about where I was a vice president of an organization that was 5 million, one that was 50 million, one that was 500 million, and I let them know that I only say that not for ego, but to explain that when we go into organizations, sometimes their first comment is, well, we're different, or
Right.
you don't understand. And as I work with them, I'm like, what works in a 5 billion works in a 5 billion. There might be different scaling, and I've had organizations that after working with them, they're like, you're right. You've shown us that. So, and that's just part of the process. So.
Yeah. So, wow, I love how you broke down the categories of questions, very methodical, and I appreciate it. By the way, I'm just saying in advance because
Sure.
I really would like to hear what you have to say about managing millennials. Millennials, a lot of millennial jokes out there, as you know. So let's talk about millennials. Tell us what you've learned and what you share.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of this, and there are a lot of realities. I mean, I had uh, natural success with managing millennials. And so that made me take the step back and really start defining. So the first thing I say is that millennials are the most courageous work group that I ever worked with. In fact, I'd find that I'd have to try to hold them back because they want to race to do something and to push them forward. So I came up, one of the terms my mom used to tell me is stop, look, and listen. So I would always have that sign up around their work area. In other words, don't race to it. Stop, understand your surroundings, look, and be aware, and then listen to what I have to tell you. And then as you take these approaches, you'll be successful. But I say that the top 10 things that are important to millennials are the same 10 things that are important to myself. And I'm a baby boomer, but they're in different order. And that's why people think they're different. So as a baby boomer, I did things because I was paid for it, because you told me. I took a job that some of my priorities were the stability of employment, and then how much were they going to pay? Was it going to be within my means? Where that's important to millennials, so that's probably like 9 and 10. Where number one is more about what is your reason for existence? Tell me about the company. What are the values that are you going to live there? Tell me about So that's why if you show what you do with the community, those things are actually more prevalent to them, and to where pay is important, but it's not the priority. And this is why coaches or managers, so leaders that have really good skills, that they manage people, and they're real strong in communication and transparency. They explain why we do things, are going to have high success with millennials. And that's why I had high success with them. They really appreciate understanding the why. But as a baby boomer, it made me realize, the why wasn't important for me to know. I did the job because you told me to, and I was being paid for it. However, when you as a leader tell me the why, it motivates me, and I appreciate it. But it was a lot less in the pecking order. There are some things, they grew up in the digital age that you and I didn't. And that's why they're used to quick answers. And that's why they race to do things, because it's at a quicker pace to them. And so just having to teach them that. There's one myth that I think fools a lot of people, where they say that millennials feel that they're entitled. In other words, if I come to work here, I need to be promoted in 2 years, even if I just do my job or show up to work every day on time. And or millennials, why should I invest too much? Because if they're going to have 7 jobs in 2 years, and they jump job to job. So the thing I quote back is, if you feel that they jump job to job, it means that you're not showing them what a career is, because there's a difference between a job and a career. So you need to create that environment. And one of the things we teach companies is, instead of career ladders, we teach them to create what's called a career lattice. That meaning that, hey, here's every role in our company. When you get hired, here are the requirements and the skill sets and the knowledge that's needed for each role. And I encourage you that if you at any time have interest in one, please inquire. But I would expect you to take self-accountability in a lot of your development. So that's why we give you the skills and the skill sets that you would need to learn. That if you take self-accountability, and then if that role becomes available, or an opportunity to invest further in your development, your self accountability makes that decision easier for me. If it's time to promote someone, that self accountability that you're taking makes that easy. And so we teach how to eliminate any entitlement from day one by creating that environment. And really, the only reason that they think they're entitled is they haven't created an environment on teaching people what a career is versus a job. And I've had success. And if you read the back of my book, I had millennials endorse it that worked for me. One of them started with me at 20 years old. He had never sold before. This was a sales position. By the time he was 23, he bought his first house. And he talks about he's 25, making six figures, and but how the environment and everything created really stabilized him immediately. And showed him I have a future here. Why would I want to leave as well? So
that is really a refreshing outlook. Really, that's fantastic. But yeah, you've really dug deep and figured some things out, especially what you said about stop, look, and listen, and you listened
right.
to what their priorities were. It's kind of like, when I was selling radio advertising, which I kind of forced myself into. I love sitting behind a microphone and spinning records, rock and roll records and all. But to go into sales, I had to learn. They didn't want to know about the features. They want to know about the benefits. Like they didn't care how tall our tower was and what show was on when and all that nonsense. They want to know, again, what we talk about, what's WIIFM, what's in it for me. So for you to look at their priorities, that really recategorizes the whole concept of how to reach this group of people who are very valuable employees. Obviously, where I come out of the Silicon Valley, that's very critical that they understand that, hey, I'm not just going to graduate from Stanford, create an app at 21 years old, sell it to Google for 10 million and retire. Then I'm depressed. Then I'm depressed after that.
Right. No, that's important. And it's like, because once you start teaching, they grasp it and they hang on to it and they look for more. And so that's why I say they're courageous and they're hungry. But I think it's our responsibility to show that guidance, so I think that's important.
And one of the things, I contacted my old general manager at the very first professional radio gig I ever had. And years later, I tracked him down in Kansas City and thanked him for his influence on me, because he invested in the sales staff. Back then, took us to see Zig Ziglar and, and I've seen Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and all these. I sat down next to Brian Tracy one time. Didn't know he was the keynote speaker. He sat down next to me. Hi, I'm Brian.
Such a great speaker. Great books.
Yeah. So is that do you expose them to? I mean, now those are, like, quite frankly, a previous generation of well-known people. So do you expose them to some of that kind of leadership?
Yes. In fact, one thing I would always do with my teams is we would read books. And so whether it was every 2 weeks, you say, hey, okay, we're going to read these pages, and then let's get on a call and let's go through the books. And I would have, it would rotate on who would lead it, but it would be one of them that would lead the call and say, what did we learn here or talk about here? And at first it takes a little bit for them to start opening up, but we wanted to create an environment where it was okay to be vulnerable and it was okay to disagree, but you did that professionally. And in fact, one of the books that we would always read is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So, and then Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Right.
Obviously, we talked about 1 Minute Manager, but there's just a lot of great books out there. And even today, I'm a big John Maxwell fan.
That's my buddy John. We're good friends.
Yeah, well, tell him I said hello.
Yeah.
I love the minute with Maxwell, because this is great how you could start your day, set your mindset. Everything's mindset, and what do you believe in today? And that's where one of the things I teach, whether it's leadership or emotional intelligence, which is part of leadership, is that your belief is what drives your attitude, and your attitude is what drives your behavior, which become your actions. And so, as a leader, if you could understand and alter someone's belief system, if you can get down deep enough to what they're believing, then you can have a major impact. And we discuss about how to do that even proactively, as well. So on the reward side, when you're setting policies or you're creating methods or initiatives for your organization, there's a lot of ways that you can do that.
It's a lot of good stuff. So you may or may not be aware of this, but I actually met John in 1988 in Boston, where he spoke, and a bunch of us flew out of Logan to San Diego and spent a private week of leadership with John down in Lemon Grove, California, near San Diego. And
Right.
that was before he wrote 120 books. And then years later, his people tracked me down. I went ahead and got certified as a John Maxwell coach. And I work with a coach in the East Bay who we actually teach the dysfunctions and the Stephen Covey stuff. And years ago, when my wife had her doctor's office, for a staff meeting, we actually read out loud the Who Moved My Cheese book.
Yeah.
And one lady resigned. I guess her cheese got moved. But anyway, it was an eye opener. That book in particular, just that parable, that story of
right.
Yeah.
It's like, are you gonna be the rat that says, no, I want my cheese right here every day,
right.
Or to realize your cheese has been moved, and
Yeah.
what are you going to go do to find new cheese? That's just this great way of telling the story.
Yeah, I think my cheese has been moved personally for me a lot of times.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I'm sure, and this is where John Maxwell's so good. I teach that great leaders learn how to story tell, and because sometimes you could say, "Here's why we do it," or "I want you to do it," but when you're able then to actually bring stories to it, that's where a lot of times people have the aha moments
Right.
as well, and the buy-in, and obviously credibility is everything, and so it adds to credibility as well. Yeah, I enjoyed. I mentioned the Cesar Chavez Foundation, and Andres Chavez, which is the grandson of Cesar Chavez, wrote in one of my reviews, because I'd always have them, hey, how did this session go? It was a simple comment, but I appreciate it, where he's like, I don't think there's a scenario Mark's never been involved with. And it just meant, well, I guess, in anything that we had to discuss, we had stories or facts, because I was able to say, well, here's what I've seen in business, here's what I've encountered, and he just told me that was important to him, and but it was one of those where I'm like, I appreciate that comment.
And so you've been invited to talk on a bunch of radio stations, a bunch of TV networks, different shows. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, when you first start out, it takes a little proactive on. With one of my books, I had the publisher, did some reaching out, but I actually had them teach me, well, what are you doing? Show me, what are we creating? And then I started just doing it myself as well, reaching out, saying, and then each time it builds credibility, and especially with the podcast, many times I'm just invited quite a bit, but recently I was with Jack Canfield on a show called Hollywood Live, which was aired on ABC, and he interviewed me, and great contact to have now. In fact, this was he loved the book, A Script for Aspiring Women Leaders. So it was actually even great to hear his feedback. The interaction afterwards as well.
Nice.
But it's one of those. Do you have a story to tell? And is it for others' benefit? The passion is, certainly you want to make sure what you're doing benefits others. And you mentioned that earlier about how does it benefit. And I even teach that to organizations when they create their mission statements. Your mission statement should be, anyone in your organization should be able to understand that your mission statement is your reason for existence. And they should be able to tell anybody, no matter what role or position they are, partner, potential customer, whoever it may be, how it benefits them. And if they can understand it from that perspective, then you got an effective mission statement. And so in the book, A Script for Aspiring Women Leaders, in chapter 1, we teach them how to build their own set of values and their own mission statement, their personal mission statement, as a foundation for everything else that they're going to build on top of that. In other words, it's like we call it define what you will live by. You have to know what you're going to live by before you start anything else. And it's one of the big things that we teach.
Yeah, I really appreciate Jack, and I got the privilege and blessed to meet his chicken soup business partner, Mark Victor Hansen.
Yeah.
He was down in Florida, and I think Orlando, maybe doing a thing with Robert Allen, the real estate guy, and they gave me a little award for this TV commercial I had done for my wife's business. But nice to meet those guys. Really, really cool. And Jack, what a cool thing to meet him for sure. Yeah.
Well, where they're great, and that's why. In fact, Jack reminded me of my mom's. My mom used to always say, "I want you to always seek mentors, but it's always important that not only you have mentors, but that you pay it forward and mentor other people." Yes. And you will find that when you will learn more of from the people you're mentoring than from those that mentored you. But it's the interaction in that, and I could see right away that Jack Canfield really has that instilled in him about how he pays it forward. He was telling stories about early any of the struggles or his beliefs, and but what he did here, and we both had the same concept of it's important to have an accountability partner. So we shared some of that insight, and it wasn't. He's just so open, and that just shows that's why his passion is there, and it was just. It's one of those reminders of I have to make sure that I'm always that way as well.
Yeah, exactly. You probably have this in somewhere in your area. I'm a member of the BNI, Business Networking International, about 39, 42 business owners now, and their main phrase is "givers gain," and that's correct. That's the concept. I was actually in Orlando when the founder of BNI won the John Maxwell Leadership Award for that year. It was really kind of cool since I had been involved with that organization for well over 10 years. So anyway, how can I help you? What are you doing now? You're running this coaching company, coaching business?
Yeah, I do coaching and consulting. So whether it's one-on-one, with the leaders or organizations. I do, I was traveling a lot prior to COVID, but a lot's done virtually, but I still travel. I'll be going to Louisiana with an organization coming up. So I do a lot of workshops where they want me to come in and work with their team, whether it's their leadership team or employees. It's funny, but COVID has driven a lot of customer service issues even. So, I've worked with an aerospace organization recently, a windstorm organization out of Florida. All that COVID has driven. Habitat for Humanity was one. Customer service issues on how it's affected their business, and because it's brought change. Yes. But that type. So.
Yeah, I've always liked to point out the fact that what happened last year, it's not the first time things like that happen, where it forces creativity to emerge out of what seems to be awful tragedy, which it is. But at the same time, new companies emerge, new ways of doing things and new ways to handle situations. And you have to decide which direction you're going to go with that. And I hear what you're saying. That's fantastic. So what is there a website that you'd like me to share or?
Sure. I make it real easy. It's my name, www.markvillareal.com. And you'll see my contact information there and the different things that we do. You could look at, some of my TV morning shows I've been on or, but look at our workshops, but we do almost everything we do nowadays is customized. So you may say, yeah, I like this workshop, but here's what's happening with my organization. So we customize it, fine tune it. 35 years in corporate America with 21 years at the C level, it has at least it's been a benefit to me on helping organizations saying, well, here's what I've seen, here's what I encountered, and so let's define it to your exact needs instead of just something right off the shelf.
Perfect. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I'm speaking today with Mark Villareal, my guest, and we're very happy to talk with you today, Mark. And want to encourage our listeners to get to the website, see what's going on, and if it makes sense, if you're a good fit to work with Mark, and he can customize something for you. Let's say, like Mr. Nike once said, just do it. But Mark, I before we go, I have to ask you my standard question here. So, what was the very first job you ever had when you were a kid?
I actually, I did things I didn't consider a job. I guess I passed out flyers for a dry cleaners.
Okay,
sure. At that time, walking to every house and putting them on their door, on the doorknob.
Right.
So I guess that was probably some of the first things I did. But and then at 14, I started working in the restaurant business. So I worked in restaurants for quite a bit, and to where my wife likes it because I'm a very good cook. So, and she is too. She's fantastic. So.
Oh, that's very, very, very cool. I talked to a gentleman a couple of days ago who was my guest. I asked him that question. He actually built a lemonade stand when he was like 7, and he had it down to a science. And his mother's actually squeezed the lemons fresh and got it all ready for him.
Wow.
But what he did was, you'll find this interesting. He actually knew when the garbage trucks were coming by, and he would do a sales pitch to the garbage. He would sell out by noon at 7 years old.
There you go. Yeah, he understood the concept of location.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, wow, just a real pleasure to meet with you today and have this conversation. And thank you for your generosity with your background and your experience and sharing that with us. I really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you for having me.
I'm Dave Henning with the Fresh Start Podcast, fresh ideas for business and personal growth. And I hope you find our conversation constructive and helpful to you today. Have a great day.